Okay, one of the big sectors that has fluctuated greatly in the percentage of its budget of the state budgets going to is public higher education, and this was true across the states during the Great Recession. It really dramatically changed the amount of money public colleges received from their states. In Virginia and Michigan, they moved their flagship universities, the University of Virginia, the University of Michigan, to be entirely tuition dependent. The state stopped providing subsidies at all. In California, the state shifted responsibility from um, um, public funds to tuition funds, and we saw big spikes in tuition at that time. So when we think about college budgets, we have to understand a few things. First of all, that colleges require money to operate. They have to pay for professors, they have to pay for administration, they have to pay for support staff. They also have to pay for buildings and supplies and pensions and all of that. So it costs a fixed amount of money to just operate a college. Over time, though, some of the demands have changed. So because the federal government requires certain kinds of services in order to provide the federal spending, it has meant that we've had an increase in especially middle level administrators. And so, for instance, federal financial aid requires that that schools have an entire financial aid department that does more than just cut checks. They interact with the federal government on a much stronger scale, and that means you need more people in financial aid if you're going to offer financial aid. There are also demands placed on colleges, like the Title IX demands, that if there's if there's a report of sexual assault, the university has to have an infrastructure to reply to that, and that is a federal level law. The important thing about this is that the requirements put on administration and put on a school to have increasing numbers of administrators to meet federal government demands has been a big part of why college costs have gone up. But it we tend to put all of the change on increasing number of administrators, but there are also other things. For instance, there have been changing demands of students. Students have wanted new and more expensive services. Usually, this comes in terms of fancier dorms, fancier student unions, but there's also a demand for a more extensive college life kind of services. And so, in a way, schools have kind of competed and raced to deliver more and more student friendly, student demanded kinds of things. But another factor in all of this is that the university workforce is not amenable to technological efficiency. So in industry after industry after industry, we've seen that they've been able to do more with fewer people because they introduced technology. And if you think about like the show Mad Men, if you've ever seen that, and just how many support staff there were, the every advertising executive had a secretary. There was a switchboard where there were people transferring um, um, phone calls, actually plugging in and transferring phone calls. And so this is important because as we introduce the computer and we introduce advanced telephones, get rid of a lot of that support staff. And in factories, as we introduce robots, we have to have as many workers. And so, in many, many, many industries, they've been able to lower the percentage of the money of their total revenue that they're spending on employees um, um, without affecting productivity. Universities can't really do that. You can't build a robot professor. So universities have had a much more difficult time using technology to disrupt costs. Um, but in addition to these rising costs of delivering education, what also matters is the percentage of the budget paid for by the state and the percentage of the budget paid for by students themselves in the form of tuition. Then, in addition, it matters what the breakdown of public to private universities are, what percentage of students are attending public universities and what percentage are using private universities. So here in California, only 25% of college students go to a private school like USC or Stanford or University of Redlands, Chapman University. Those are private schools, and only 25% of our total student population goes to those schools. In addition, the state is the most generous with providing things like Cal Grants, so that people who attend private schools, Californians who attend private schools, are have more money from the state than anywhere else in the country. Um, so in many states and places like Massachusetts, the public college network is much weaker, and students just go through high school expecting that they will go to a private college, and the ratio of public private is really different. And then the students who go to private colleges don't get the kind of grants that they get here. Also matters what percentage of the population is enrolled in college. And so we're going to take a look at that here. So in 1960, the UC enrollment was just under 44,000. The Cal State enrollment was about 61,000, and community college enrollment was about 98,000. So if you look at the chart, you can see kind of the relationship between the population and the population in college. So in 1960, about 1.2% of the total California population was enrolled in a public college. In 1980, it goes up to 4.6 and kind of stays that way for the next 20 years. And then by the 21st century, we see the percentage of Californians enrolled in public colleges go up above 7%. And so it's really important to understand that this is not just that state spending is not just a matter of how much they spend. It's a matter of how many people are enrolled, and letting those education dollars not go as far as they used to. So we'll stop there in terms of kind of this is one example of kind of how state level spending changes over time and the demands change. And most of the population, students, parents, see tuition increasing, and they blame it on lack of state funding. They blame it on new services in terms of administration and student services. But there's also this idea that the funding, the per student funding is actually dropped, inflation adjusted, because there's just so many more students attending.